Thank you.
Sure. Well, it's nice to see everybody. And so we are, oh my God, legislative session number 27 for November 16th. So let's just go to fiscal matters first and contracts. The first one is on page 8. And we have Ms. Laura Raleigh, for the Director of Department of Aging. Good afternoon, Ms. Raleigh.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council. The administration is requesting a BAT, or a budget appropriation transfer, totaling $490,000 from our publication and congregate meals grant to the department's information assistance, support services, and home delivered meals program. This is directly related to the fact that, by definition of the regulations, congregate meals have to be served in a congregate setting, and we are not currently permitted to do that. So even the meals that we're handing out and people are taking back to their apartments, or the boxes of food that we're putting in their trunk and they're taking home, are by definition under home delivered meals. So we need to transfer that money over to the other grant in order to continue to fund the meal delivery service that we've been doing.
Okay, well, it certainly sounds like we need to be doing that at this time. Anybody have anything for Ms. Riley? Okay, Ms. Riley, thank you so much for testifying. Next item, Mr. Benjamin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council. The administration is requesting approval of a contract with Class Action Administration, LLC, DBA J&D Legal Administration, to provide claims administration services which are required as part of the settlement reached between the county and the U.S. Department of Justice regarding the police department's prior hiring practices. The contract commences upon council approval, or the date upon which the U.S. District Court of Maryland approves the settlement agreement, whichever is later, and continues through December 30th, 2021, and will renew automatically for 2 additional one-year periods, with the option to extend the initial term or any renewal term an additional 90 days. The contract does not specify a maximum compensation for the initial term. Compensation may not exceed $112,000 for the entire term, including the renewal and extension periods.
Thank you, Mr. Benjamin. Are there any questions or comments from the members?
Madam Chair, I have one question.
Yes, I'm sorry. Who is that? I'm sorry.
This is Councilman Quirk.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Quirk. There you are. Yes, certainly.
Yeah, Mr. Benjamin, has the district court approved this, or does that occur only after like the fairness hearings? Or I just wanted to check in to make sure I understood the approval or the settlement date. And still a little unclear on that.
The U.S. District Court will provisionally approve the settlement, and then set in the fairness hearing, which would be probably sometime in early April of 2021. I anticipate that the court will grant the approval for the settlement in the coming days. And once that happens, then the claims administrator would then notify potential individuals of the fairness hearing, which again will be sometime in April of 21. So the court has not approved it yet, but I anticipate that happening in the next few days.
And can we also get a copy of this test? Can we get a copy so we can look at the test ourselves as well between now and the time we vote?
I will work on that, sir.
And Mr. Bostic, you reviewed the settlement itself?
I have not reviewed the actual settlement documents, Mr. Quirk, but I did review the notification letter that Mr. Benjamin sent to the members, outlining the parameters that, summarizing the settlement and what the council's involvement might be, including the approval of this contract and eventually a contract with the test consultant. So I have reviewed that.
And I just want to note for the record, I served with the late County Executive Kevin Kamnitz, and I do know Don Mueller well. I know he was one of the point people trying to promote more diversity in hiring and also promotions. I know the two chiefs. Who I know Chief Jim Johnson well. I honestly can't say I know Chief Sheridan well, but from everything I saw at the time of this period in question, I saw many efforts very much the opposite of some of the allegations. I saw tremendous efforts at trying to hire and promote diversity so our police force would look more like the communities that we served. I mean, I remember the Lake County Executive Kevin Kamenetz. I mean, this was a big issue. This is a big issue for him personally, and I know Don Mueller and Chief Johnson also were very much dedicated in trying to hire and promote so we could have a police force look like more like the community that we represent.
I agree, Councilman. Anyone else?
I agree as well.
All right, if there's no other comments or questions, thank you, Mr. Benjamin.
Thank you.
Next item, turn to page 11. And we have Ms. DeAndre Walker, our acting director, Department of Public Works.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the council.
Good afternoon.
The administration is requesting approval of a resolution for the purpose of the extension of a sanitary sewer system in the Milford Mill area serving 23 approved properties. Cliff Road sewer extension is a health project, and because of the nature of this project, there are certain requirements and benefits to the property owners. In accordance with several articles of the Baltimore County Code and department policies, property owners must connect their property to the public sewer system and abandon the septic system. Connection to the sewer system must be within 1 year of the notice of completion and release of the system. In addition, the notice of completion and requirement to connect will be sent to property owners when the system is complete and available for service. The deadline to connect is 1 year from the date of notice. The annual sewer benefit and construction loan will be added to the property tax bill issued July 1 following a notice of completion. And the county does not require that these charges be paid off to sell or transfer the property to a new owner, except in certain situations involving property subdivisions and commercial properties. Owners of those residential properties may finance their plumber's bill for 40 years at 5% interest rate, and financing the plumber bill will result in an increase in the construction loan charge on the tax bill. The amount of the increase will be $58.28 per $1,000 financed. The construction cost is $857,000, of which property owners will pay about $485,000. And Baltimore County will be responsible for $372,000, of which $294,000 is county assistance requiring county council approval.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Are all these septic systems failing currently? Is that what the issue is?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. They actually started in, our first survey was done in 2017.
And how many homes does this affect? I'm sorry.
It's 23 homes.
23. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Ms. Walker?
Madam Chair, I do,
Yes.
Izzy.
Yes.
So Cliff Mar and Milford, that's it's suburban, but it's very urbanized, and surprised that we have septic. Do you have a sense of how much septic, how prevalent this issue is throughout the county, and where we have, it's just right out, is it inside the Beltway? It's just outside the Beltway, I think, 695. But a little surprised to hear that we have septic in these urbanized areas, and we haven't hooked them up to public sewer by now. by 2020. I'm just wonder how prevalent the problem is in the more urbanized parts of the county.
Like
Well,
I say, it's prevalent on the waterfront homes.
And I could probably get the staff to see if they have some research that we could share. I don't know off the top of my head if we actually have that information readily available, but these 23 homes in this neighborhood are the last of the 23 homes that need to be connected.
Madam Chair, I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you know that area very well, but I thought that the waterfront areas were at one time less urbanized and had a more rural environment.
Yes, they actually had outhouses, and most of the current waterfront properties at one time or another were either just parcels of land with just land where families would go and enjoy the water front on the weekends, and then little by little they added outhouses. And then as they decided to actually build and live there, but they put septic in, and a lot had well water way before city water was ever hooked in those areas. And I still have the whole Bird River area is still on septic and well water. Yeah.
Septic, the nature of the design is it's designed to fail. And so I'm really, I think we're going in the right direction by getting these properties off of septic and onto public sewer.
For sure, Mr. Patoka, because certainly we're not talking about waterfront properties now, but when the septics fail in the waterfront, it goes into our waterfront.
Yep. Yep.
So you're swimming in it.
We only have one Earth, so we gotta do what we can to protect it.
Anything else for Ms. Walker? Thank you, Ms. Walker.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, next we'll switch over to page 1, Bill 97-20, and we have Director Michael Malinoff with us.
Madam Chair, members of the council, Michael Malinoff, Director of Permits, Approvals, and Inspections. Just as a follow-up to our previous meeting, we had a meeting earlier this week, or a discussion earlier this week with Councilman Crandall. In the meeting was Ms. Rouston, attorneys Ferguson, Vilner, and myself, and we discussed several issues, including 2 amendments that we presented the last meeting on page 4, line 9, having to do with where the detail pay would be applied, and then on page 18, line 17, striking 45 and adding 60 days till the effective date of the legislation, so that we would have time to reach out to interested parties. I think the meeting went well, and that's the status as of now.
Okay. Councilman Crandall, you have anything to say?
I do, Madam Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank the administration and Mr. Bostwick and Mr. Phillips that joined us yesterday for a discussion. It was, I believe, over an hour long. We covered a decent amount of territory. I still have a lot of concerns about this bill, and I've been speaking with Mr. Bostwick on possible amendments, and I don't want to. I think we've kind of beat this to death. I think that you all understand my concerns, but some of the territory that we covered that I want you all to know about. If you read the executive summary of the bill, there's the second to last sentence in that executive summary says the chief of police may adopt a detailed pay policy under which applicants for permits under this subtitle may be required to pay for services provided by on-duty officers under well-defined circumstances. So then when you go to the bill, those circumstances are, in my opinion, not well-defined, and still leaves the bill very open-ended to put some of our local community events at financial risk and ultimate peril. So I still have that concern, and We did get clarification from Ms. Ralston that some of the events, and I think the council already knows this, I think she's communicated this to everyone, that certain events that we were concerned about, street festivals, farmers markets, foot races, and with Councilman Quirk's amendment, parades would not fall into some of these provisions, which is all good clarification. However, we did learn yesterday through some very quick Googling by Mr. Malinoff, I think it was, that what the definition of a carnival was, because the intent, as we know, the genesis of this bill is to really regulate carnivals on private properties, because that's where the problems have occurred. And I'm actually at the location right now where we've had most of the problems. So, Mr. Bostwick, do you want to recite what a carnival is, and then I can just continue with just my concern, and then we can move on to other speakers?
I would actually need to get back into the Maryland statutes and code and that business regulation article to find it. So I can do that.
You or Mr. Malinoff just give us the gist?
It's essentially, as I recall, a carnival is an amusement is a type of amusement with sometimes with rides, but not necessarily including rides. And I can certainly elaborate on that with a few minutes.
Okay. Well, and what we talked about yesterday was, without having that definition right in front of us, is that events like the Dundalk Heritage Fair, I believe the Reisterstown Festival, I believe the Parkville Fair, where rides are leased, whether it's a merry-go-round or it's a bunch of mechanized rides, they would fall under the definition of a carnival. So we have, in my district alone, a lot of nonprofit events that would potentially fall under the provisions of this bill. So that's where, I'm still concerned about it. I've asked for a legal opinion as to, if the goal is to regulate carnivals at malls, then let's regulate that, because it seems to me that we're lumping in events that already work with the police department, sometimes a year in advance. The police department knows when these events are going to occur, so they're able to plan for it. I don't. We're sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater here with this legislation. I have strong opinions on it, obviously. So I do want to thank my colleagues for voting to extend the bill so we could continue to talk about it, and I'll look forward to the discussion this week with the various stakeholders that have expressed concerns about the bill, and I mean the local event organizers, either our nonprofits, our chambers. We have, I think Kimmy has a list of those folks that we'll be talking with later in the week.
Councilman Randall, I'm curious, have any of those, I'm not familiar with a lot of them, but the one that's been around ever since my children were small, the Rosedale Carnival, and I believe they come to some of these areas. Have you heard from them? Have they reached out to you, or have you reached out to them?
I have not.
Okay.
I know that the administration, if you remember from the previous work session, the administration did say that they talked to some of the carnival operators and got their input. And actually, Mr. Malinoff should speak to that, not me. But no, I have not spoken with carnival operators.
Okay. I believe Stacy Rogers is on the phone. Stacy, are you on the phone?
Madam Chair, I'm trying to find her on our list here.
She was having a really tough time getting on, and I just want to know if she could confirm that they're still working with these vendors, I guess, what you would call them.
She hasn't called back in yet.
Okay, it was, I just wanted to, see if she wants to confirm something. Not important.
Madam
Okay,
Chair, I do have the definition if you want, and
Yes,
this is Michael
sure.
Malinoff. And I think
Sure.
that the tone of the discussion, and I think where we left it was to see if there could be language that basically used the term ancillary to the event, carnival ancillary to the event, rather than every event that just happens to have a small carnival aspect to it. But
Mhm.
basically, it says here that the carnival means an itinerant enterprise that consists principally of one or more temporarily located amusement attractions. And that comes from the state regulatory dollar, DLLR, Title 3-101. And they regulate the rides for safety purposes.
Okay.
And that was the nature of the discussion, was to try to obviously not penalize every organization and potentially create a problem, but to focus in on the ones that were more the focus of the amendments that we proposed.
Thank
Madam
Thank-
Chair.
Yes, Councilman.
Yes, this question is for Mr. Bostwick or Mr. Malinoff. With the wine tasting events where sometimes there's 500-600 cars attending this event and 1,000 people, are they considered events?
In this legislation, I don't think we conceived of them unless there was some sort of special event license permit needed to hold it in a particular location. A lot of those are on private property otherwise, and that would be more handled through Mr. Moeller and whatever licensing requirements would come through the liquor board.
So what I'm asking about the farm breweries and wineries who that have wine tasting or beer tasting, would they need to have a license or not?
Under this legislation, I don't see it. What I again would say, and we can get back to you on it. What I would say again is any of those kind of events are more governed by the liquor license process. And
Well, I would
go ahead.
handle through the state of Maryland because those licenses come from the state.
Right. I don't know.
I did get a question from one of them whether or not their wine tasting would be considered event and would need to go through the process of this bill. I don't see how you can say they're not an event. So if you and Mr. Bostwick, Mike and Tom work on this, I'd be really interested in what you think in this particular issue. I mean, if you have 500-600 cars attending an event for wine tasting, I would think that it would be an event. So.
Well, I would imagine it depends on where it's held, but I'll meet with Mr. Bostwick.
Yeah, let's see if it's held at a winery or a brewery, etc. Farm brewery, etc. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Malinoff.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
You too. Stay safe.
You too. Bye now.
Okay, we're going to move on to page 5 under council business. Mr. Jones, you have Bill 105-20.
Yes, Madam Chair. This legislation basically adjusts the parking requirement for restaurant in a revitalization district. Obviously, restaurants are having a very hard time these days, given COVID-19. And this is an opportunity for us to try to be as proactive as we can to try to encourage another restaurant to come on Liberty Road in revitalization.
Okay. Any comments or questions for Mr. Jones?
Madam Chair, I do.
Yes, Councilman.
Councilman, does this apply specifically to the Liberty Road Revitalization District or revitalization districts countywide?
This is simply the Liberty Road Revitalization District, particularly this location. However, it should be noted that the text or the verbiage used is very similar to, if not the same, as used in many other revitalization districts around the county. But they were there first.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I believe we have a speaker, Ms. Belcastro.
Yes, Madam Chair. David Karseski, and I'm going to call upon him. And before we get started really quick, we're going to try something new for this WebEx. I'm going to share my screen, to which a timer will show on the screen so that the person who is testifying knows how much time they have left, instead of a timer being behind me. So we're going to try this.
We're so high tech anymore. I just can barely stand it.
Chris is having way too much fun with all her new toys.
I know, right? Ooh.
Wait a minute.
Ooh.
Now.
But are we going to be able to see David Karseski? No.
I can see him, but you cannot.
That's what I want to see. Bring him up.
That's no fair.
Bring him up. Bring him up.
Okay, I'm going to call on Mr. Karseski.
Okay.
Mr. Karseski,
Yes, good evening.
you may begin.
Thank you. Good evening, Councilwoman Bevins and other members of the County Council. It's like I'm staring at a shot clock. This is David Karseski, Hannibal LLP with offices in Towson. I'm speaking in favor of County Council Bill number 105-20. The legislation, if passed, would expand the applicability of an existing section within the county's parking regulations, as Councilman Jones noted. Today, in certain revitalization districts, those are Arbutus, Catonsville, and Pikesville, the parking requirement for a standard restaurant use is 5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet if a minimum investment is made. Allowing this same parking ratio along a portion of the Liberty Road Revitalization District would encourage redevelopment of older properties by allowing more flexibility to lease tenant spaces. This is the exact premise for the creation of these revitalization districts, and more flexibility to add standard restaurants to a redevelopment project will assist in this effort. Thank you for allowing me some time to speak.
Thank you. Was that 3 minutes, Chris Hewitt?
No, Madam Chair.
He still had a minute left, right?
Yes.
3 minutes.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say, Mr. Karseski?
Only have a good evening, everyone on the council.
Just teasing you.
Not the staff.
I think that's probably a lot of pressure for somebody when they're looking at their screen and the number is like right there in front of them. Oh, God. Okay. All right. Any other questions about this? We only had the one speaker for Mr. Jones. Alrighty then, we're going to move on to page 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Karseski.
Yep. We're going to.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Just an FYI, I believe Ms. Rogers is on now.
Oh, good.
In
Good.
case.
Okay. Ms. Rogers, you with us?
I'm going to unmute her. Ms. Rogers?
Yes, Madam
Oh,
Chair, I'm here. I've been here for a few minutes, but I can't get on through the WebEx.
Okay, but you're here. We can hear you, so we can call on you, or you can let us know if you have anything to say. Very good.
Sure. And I did have, if we can circle back, response to Councilmember Patoka's questions about where that septic project is. It's further up beyond the Beltway, almost into Randallstown. I looked it up on the map when we were reviewing it.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers.
Okay, so we're going to move on to page 6, Bill 106-20. Mr. Marks?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Bill 106-20 adds new permitted uses in certain areas of the BLR zone in the South Towson Design Review area. As drafted, the bill permits a music studio, learning center, yoga fitness studio, bowling alley, veterinarian. We are talking to the community and the developer, and I will probably have an amendment to the council very shortly.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Marks? Do we have a speaker on this bill?
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator Chris West.
Okey-doke.
Let me find him on the list and.
I think Chris, he may be for the next bill. I don't want to speak for him, but I think he's the next bill.
Oh, okay.
I just want to say that he did sign up for Bill 106, but if his intention was to sign up for Bill 107, we can certainly hold his sheet, but he registered for Bill 106. Would you like me to confer with him to find out if that is in fact what he intended to do? Or do you know that for a fact, Councilman?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, we'll just hold his sheet then.
Okay, thank you.
So there are no questions or comments for Councilman Marks on 106-20? Okay, if not, we'll move on to page 7, the last item. Bill 107-20, Mr. Marks.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I do have a presentation, if that's all right. It'll be brief. It's brief.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that,
Oh,
please?
I have 4 PowerPoint slides I'd like to put up, and I'll
Sure.
be brief. Okay, thank you very much. Chris? Okay, thank you very much. Bill 107-20 limits the height of buildings. Okay, there you go. Buildings in certain areas near downtown Towson. In the neighborhoods that surround downtown Towson, apartments are generally low-level, not multi-story complexes. Here are some photographs of apartment buildings in neighborhoods such as Knollwood, Agsworth Manor, and Rogers Forge. Next slide, please. Historic East Towson. Many of you are familiar with this community. Historic East Towson was founded by freed slaves in the 1850s. Homes for America has proposed a 56-unit development on a 2.5-acre plot of land between 413 East Pennsylvania Avenue and Joppa Road. The land is heavily wooded. As noted in the Tower Light, quote, residents of East Towson contest the proposal, arguing that it would maximize an already congested flow of traffic, overcrowd schools, and exacerbate stormwater flooding in the area. Next slide, please. I have worked for the past 2 years to try to reduce the scale of this project. I am not a Johnny-come-lately in terms of trying to get this to be a smaller project. And I just put up 2 quotes from the Towson Times, one from November 1st, 2019, and another from February 7th of 2020. So I certainly share the community's concerns about the scale of this project. Despite these many meetings, the size of this project remains unchanged after 2 years of dialogue. Next slide, please. Status of the development. Everything seems to be getting done to accelerate the approval of this project. In fact, there's a design review panel hearing today at 5:30, and I'm hoping that one of the speakers will be able to speak today. Next slide, please. This is a bill that certainly applies to broad areas of West Towson. But the Red Maple Place project, my point here is that this project will stand for decades if it's built. It is important to construct this project right. You are going to hear today that if this project goes away, it will somehow jeopardize the consent agreement or the agreement signed by County Executive Kamenetz in 2016 to provide affordable housing. My point is that a smaller project will still help Baltimore County meet its obligations under that agreement. The frustration I have is that some advocacy groups seem to have taken an all or nothing approach. As council members, we constantly seek special purpose legislation. In fact, this council passed legislation supported by the developer that modified the distance requirement. So I worked with the developer, and this council approved legislation that moved this building, and I'm thankful for that. Unfortunately, the height is still an issue. Our job as council members is to represent neighborhoods and to do our very best to address their concerns. And I'm just going to close with this. My colleagues on the council, I think, know that I am not a reactionary, extreme member of this council. I always try to find consensus. I always try to find common ground. We did it before by addressing the distance for this project. And I think we're at a point now where the council needs to step in and try to address the height, which remains a concern. So thank you very much.
Councilman Marsh, will you talk to us a little bit about the height? And it's 59 units, correct?
It's 59 units.
And the height of the building, how many floors?
Well, it's 30 feet, so I guess it would be about two stories. But the height is consistent with the structures, the height of other apartment buildings throughout Towson.
Okay, all right. Do any of the members or have any comments or questions for Councilman Marks?
Madam Chair, I do. Councilman Marks, so I think what the chairwoman was asking was that the current proposal, I believe, is 4 stories. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Before we have a considerable amount of speakers signed up, I will make some comments only because I've dealt with Homes for America before, and I believe that they do good work. The difference between this project, if it would go in your district, and the project that was going to go in the Rosedale district is Homes for America has a I don't know if it's a policy or just a protocol that you rent for 15 years and then you eventually, and you've put money into that unit every month. And then after 15 years, it becomes available for you to purchase. So it teaches folks how to go into home ownership. This will not do that, correct? These are for rent. People will never be able to buy them, and they are just strictly a rental property. Correct? So it's different from a lot of their other projects.
I think the Homes for America representative would be better, a better person to speak to that. My concern is the structure itself, the height, the construction of the structure. That's my main issue.
Well, I have a question for you. Would you say, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, would you say that this area, East Towson, is your lowest income area of the areas that you represent in Towson?
I would say that.
Okay. Well, the one thing I've learned, and I think most of us have learned in the past, is that no one benefits when you take large pockets of poverty and you add more people to more people to that. So no one benefits by that, even in a brand new shiny building. Okay, you know, and you have overcrowded schools right there as well. And that's the only reason I have anything to say is because we share those schools, and you know, we know what we've been dealing with for the last, well, since we've been in office actually, with the overcrowdedness of all of our schools. And the projection for these children would be for what, middle school and high school?
I think it's Hampton and Towson High School.
Towson High School. Could we possibly fit a student in Towson High School? No. Can we fit one more trailer on Towson High School's property? Absolutely not. So those are the concerns when you are dealing with that amount of units. You know, you're going to be producing children in those units. So that would be my concern. I don't know about the height for that neighborhood. I know that in Towson, period, we have taller buildings. We have the Palisades, which is a very tall building. We just built student housing, which is very tall. We have condominiums in Towson that are very tall, but they are not right in this community, but they are in the Towson area. So I guess that's all I have to say. I just make it a few.
Madam Chair, can I respond to that? Because I think that's a really, really important point. Because one of the letters from one of the groups opposing this brought up those other buildings. Well, those other buildings are located in downtown Towson.
Correct.
It's not on the periphery of Towson. And the other thing I'll point out is that the Historic East Towson community has identified a building right next to this that could be repurposed. And yet, there doesn't seem to be much interest in doing that.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Councilman, was that Jones?
Yes.
Okay.
I had a question for Councilman Marks. You say this is a 4-story building?
I believe it's 4-story, yes.
I mean, I was a little confused. The pictures you showed of the other apartment complexes, were they 3 or 4?
I think they're 2 and 3. I mean, 30 feet. It's 30 feet.
Okay. So I tell you what, I was really curious about. You brought up an issue about the settlement with the housing advocates, which I'm aware of, but I wasn't sure how this would affect it. So I guess I had a question for Mr. Benjamin, and see if he has any concerns about this legislation at all.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. There are a couple of concerns that come to mind, and reviewing particularly the correspondence from some of the advocates and the counsel for the developer as it relates to fair housing and impact on the VCA, or the Voluntary Compliance Agreement. The Fair Housing Act says that it's unlawful to refuse to sell or rent after making a bona fide offer, or to refuse to negotiate for the sale or rental of, or otherwise make unavailable or deny a dwelling to any person because of race, color, religion, sex, family status, or national origin. Now, this legislation here is neutral on its face. However, in order to be successful on a Fair Housing Act claim, a party can either establish actual discrimination, or they can show that a facially neutral zoning or land use legislation has a disparate impact on a protected group. We are subject, as you note, to the VCA. I'm concerned, based upon the information in the letters, that they are looking to establish a prima facie case that the county is engaging in acts to prevent the creation of affordable housing units in an opportunity area, and looking at the possibility of litigation. This could get them past the preliminary motion to dismiss, and again establish a prima facie case. Now, I will say this: in looking at the legislation, there are certain factors that it's arguable that the bill, or would necessitate the bill, including impact on traffic, parking, school overcrowding, environment, stormwater management. But again, the question is whether or not this would have a disparate impact on a protected group of individuals. And based upon the information I've seen, I am concerned about that, again, from a fair housing standpoint. So I think it's important to note that the county, if this bill were to pass and a lawsuit is filed, it could expose the county to some liability. And so that's something I do share with the council for its consideration.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilman Catch.
Yeah, I have a question for Councilman Marks. I'm not at all familiar with the property in question, but I'm wondering, with this particular legislation, would there be enough property available so that the same number of units could be built at a lower height, or is the property such that the number of units would have to be reduced if the height were reduced?
I'm not an engineer, but I suspect it would have to shrink. I suspect the number of units would have to shrink.
Okay, so it's basically what you're saying is that the what is planned encompasses most of the property in question then.
there is green space on the southern part of the property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And just one more thing, Madam Chair, and I'll be very brief. I do want to thank Mr. Benjamin. I've had discussions with Mr. Benjamin. You know, I'll just close by saying this: all of us have to do what we think is best for our constituents. You know, there's my colleagues have also acted on projects that they proposed for reasons I think that are similar to mine over the years, and we have to do what is best to the people we represent. And I feel very comfortable in advancing this bill because my constituents have asked for help. And I thank you all for your consideration.
Madam Chair, I just want to reiterate that indeed our schools in the area in question are all overcrowded. So this is a real problem. And so anyhow, I just want to, with the chair lady, what she said, I'm in total agreement with her and in regard to the school issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no one else, wait a minute, we have to back up for a second. Councilman Marks, you were incorrect. Mr. West was on for 106.
Oh, okay.
And Chris, is he still on?
Yes, he is. Now, we just chatted a little bit on here. He said he just had a small comment about 106. So when I call on him to speak for 107, he can comment at that time, unless you want to do it separately, Madam Chair.
Okay, that's perfect. Is that okay with you, Councilman Marks?
Yes, certainly. And I apologize to Senator West.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, first speaker.
That would be Senator West.
There you go.
So let me get my handy dandy my screen ready.
Her timer.
My lovely timer.
No pressure. No pressure.
Okay, let's Senator West.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, members of the council. Actually, David was correct. I had no comments to make on Bill 106.
Oh.
First time I've tried to do this, and I guess the next time I'll get it right. I thank you all for affording me this opportunity to speak on Bill 107. I'm the state senator representing Legislative District 42, and East Towson is part of the district. The Red Maple Project has been a source of great controversy in East Towson for the past 2 years. Prior to her death, I met with longtime East Towson community activist Adelaide Bentley to discuss the Red Maple Project. She told me that she was adamantly opposed to it, and she added that if it were to be built as proposed, it would destroy the historic East Towson neighborhood where she lived for her entire life. The current president of the Northeast Towson Improvement Association, Ms. Bentley's granddaughter, Nancy Goldring, is also strongly opposed to the project as currently conceived. In fact, I've not spoken with a single resident of East Towson who is in favor of the project. This is not a NIMBY situation. East Towson is a unique and historic African-American neighborhood founded nearly 170 years ago by recently freed slaves who worked on the Ridgely Plantation. We're not talking about a group of rich white homeowners who don't want the Red Maple Project in their neighborhood. Rather, we're talking about a strong, historic African-American community that doesn't want this project imposed on them. It should be noted that there are already 2 other affordable housing projects in East Towson, and that the community would be willing to accept this one if it were to be located in the next door existing building. The community would even be willing to accept the project if it were downsized to make it more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. But the developer has not seen fit to sit down with the leaders of the East Towson community and try to accommodate their concerns. Bill 107 merely requires the project to be appropriately downsized. I support my constituents in East Towson and I support the bill. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator. Next speaker, please.
Madam Chair, our next speaker is Anthony Fugit. Let me find Mr. Fugit. Mr. Fugit,
Yes, good
you may
evening.
begin your testimony.
Good evening, Councilwoman Bevins and members of the committee. My name is Anthony Fugit, and I serve as president of the Baltimore County NAACP. And I'm here today to oppose Bill 10720. And the NAACP will oppose any bill that is veiled to stop affordable housing in Baltimore County. That is the problem. What would you say if I told you that Baltimore County is the most segregated county in Maryland, and that there are very few counties in the country that look like it? What would you say if I said that this isn't the first attempt to eliminate affordable housing, and that there was a St. Mark's project in Pikesville that Councilman Patoka came up with reasons that it shouldn't happen? And that there was also an Overly project that came up by a French developer, and Councilwoman Bevins herself said that it couldn't happen there. You know, but the county has a history of not doing affordable housing, you know, and developers, you know, have to spend money and take time to make this happen. And I met with developers, and they said that Baltimore County is not open to affordable housing. And there are two options, as I see, as it relates to this bill. One is to withdraw it completely. The other is it will tell me how you feel as council people about affordable housing in Baltimore County. I too know Miss Bentley. And quite frankly, Miss Bentley's issue was that she wanted parking for the Elks, which was accommodated. I also know Nancy, and her original issue was the color of the building. I attended a community meeting. There was never any discussion of size. So where did that come from all of a sudden? So this is clearly a veiled attempt to stop the project, and that is wrong. And I think your council basically mentioned the letter that our co-counsel referenced as it relates to what the county is doing for affordable housing and how it's strategically, if you would, kills projects such as this. It is my hope that you will withdraw this bill and move on and let the Red Development Project proceed forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to make a comment. The project that I killed recently on Bellaire Road, where the K's pharmacy is, was several reasons. One, it started as senior housing, which I was very excited about and what the community was very excited about. But when those credits did not become available, they said, okay, we'll just do affordable housing. Well, no, you're not. When I have 8, almost going on 9 trailers at Fullerton Elementary School. So I'm not against affordable housing. I represent the 6th district. Trust me, I have enough affordable housing in my district. Okay, so just know that it was stopped because of the school population of Fullerton Elementary School. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yep.
First, I want to thank Mr. Fugit for his leadership. And I know he was a very good friend of Adelaide Bentley. But the 2 points I would make are, first, the Dunfield community, which I represent, is an area where there has been renovation of units in anticipation of the county's goals for affordable housing. So that's an area where we have seen units renovated to advance the affordable housing goals. And the other thing I'll point out is that, you know, I was at a community meeting with Mr. Fugit in the winter, and that community was pleading for help. And we're just on different sides of the issue. I've asked for your position on this before. I didn't hear back from you. I respect your position, but I'm just taking a different side on this one. So thank you.
Madam Chair.
Next speaker, please.
Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman.
Yes, just to want to make a comment on Mr. Fugit's testimony. First, thank you, Mr. Fugit. I have a great deal of respect for you and always value your opinion. but I did want to offer some clarity on your comments related to St. Mark's on the Hill. So St. Mark's on the Hill was one of 40 zoning requests in the 2nd district in the last CZMP. And it was a request for an upzone to RAE2. And if you look at the body of work, the entire body of work related to the CZMP, there were no upzones to areas that were not already built out. And what I mean by that is we targeted for requests that came in through the CZMP, we were looking to upzone in areas, we were support requests, I should say, in areas that were already pervious and already built out. And in no case did we upzone any areas that weren't already built out. In the case of St. Mark's on the Hill, that would not have been supported whether it was market rate or affordable housing. It was not the right place for that level of density, irrespective of affordable or market rate housing. So I just wanted to make that clear and appreciate your testimony.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Madam Chair, our next speaker is Michelle Yendel.
Rick.
Ms. Yendel?
Yes. Hello?
Yes, you may begin your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Yendel, and I'm speaking in support of Bill 10720. I'm a resident of East Towson, and I live at 521 McManus Way in the Harris Hill condominium. I'm retired, and I've lived in the same home for 26 years, and all the milestones of my life happened here. My children went to college, and they've gone on, and I'm here now. Harris Hill was a CDA development established to bring lower income families home ownership. As you know, homeownership is the only way that we move up the economic food chain and change the trajectory of our lives. At that time, the developers had no interest in the property that Red Maple chooses now because they thought it was way too wet and much too of a correction. I happen to agree with them. We've spent more than tens of thousands of dollars in 2020 to correct the damage from soil erosion in Harrisville. Our neighborhood has melded well with Northeast House and the historical African-American community, and we have evolved into a neighborhood of a majority of non-white residents. We have become property owners, and each of us has the opportunity for economic improvement and success. We are concerned about the school situation and the overcrowding. All of the schools are in excess of 100%. And even our elementary has taken 100 students from Pleasant Plains this year. We don't believe this is a good move. We're concerned about the traffic control. Simply, there isn't any. The Towson bypass, which we refer to as the on-ramp for I-695, prohibits walking. This means that for the most part, Towson proper and its restaurants and entertainment are lost to the residents of East Towson. The bypass has no traffic control from York Road to Providence, and we are actually at their mercy whether we walk or drive. More vehicles are not the answer, and you'll find the majority of us head eastward or north for any kind of entertainment or shopping. I don't know if there was an intention to close us off from Towson proper, but that is what has happened. We have no complaint of affordable housing. We are affordable housing. You can buy a home in our area for $200,000. That's not what it costs to live in Towson for most people. We have no problem. We've offered them other sites. There was no movement from Red Maple Place. They've never changed their mind. We have a drawing of what it will look like. Yes, it might only be 4 stories. There's a garage underneath, but there would be a 73-foot retaining wall. We would be facing a block of brown day in and day out, and all of the trees that we've known for decades will be gone. So we have plenty of other concerns, and they're not to do with affordable housing. If it weren't for affordable housing and CDA, many of us wouldn't be here. Thank you very, very much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. And I hope that you'll see our plight and pass this number 10720. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker, Madam Chair, is Carol Allen. Is it-
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Whoops. Sorry. I am the former executive director of Historic Towson and a recent 3-term member of the Baltimore County Landmark. And I'm in support of this bill 107-20. And I want to tell you a little bit about the history of the community. The parcel and proposed development sits adjacent to the historic community of East Towson. I'm sorry, now I'm getting distracted. Okay, the community sits here adjacent to East Towson, which is a community that has a legacy of slavery and racism, which you can see in today's present East Towson. If Red Maple Place is constructed as currently planned, not only is its design not compatible with the architectural features of the neighborhood it abuts, but the residents on East Pennsylvania Avenue will have a huge wall or garage in the rear of their properties, and in the front, they have the current view of an enormous power substation. East Towson was founded by a freedman, Daniel Harris, and his wife, Anne, in 1853. They had a daughter, Mary, who was still enslaved in Hampton when they worked to buy her freedom. I want you to know that these were people, human beings in that neighborhood. Over the next 160 years or so, there have been many environmental assaults on this African-American neighborhood. The Ma and Pa Railroad bisected the neighborhood, and when it was discontinued, its rail right of way was bought by BG&E for its electrical transmission lines. And later BG&E built a power substation in the middle of the neighborhood and then had the nerve to double its size in the early 2000s. After Brown versus the Board of Ed in 1957 and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Baltimore County allowed a major traffic artery or bypass to be built right down the middle of the neighborhood. Section 8 housing was built on the southeast corner off of Hill Inn Road. These were just blatant attempts to push the blacks back into the city and out of Towson. Consider this: if East Towson was George Floyd, the Baltimore County government is the policeman with its boot on the neck of the community. If you have any other questions from preservation perspective, architecture, I'd be happy to answer that. And I hope you will support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Madam Chair, next speaker is Michelle Nonan-List. Ms. List?
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Hello. I'm Michelle Nonan-List. I'm a member of the Towson Unitarian Universalist Church on Delaney Valley Road. And I'm going to read a letter which was originally sent on November 6th by Carol Headland of 106 Melbourne Avenue to John Olszewski. And I begin. The Green Sanctuary Committee, the GSC, of the Towson Unitarian Universalist Church, TUUC, opposes the proposed Red Maple Place housing development in East Towson. The Unitarian Universalist Association recognized TUUC as a congregation dedicated to environmental stewardship, and it is within this framework that the Green Sanctuary Committee, GSC, was formed in 2006 to proclaim and act on our commitment to respect the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. The Red Maple housing development is another formidable assault on the landscape of Towson. The removal of mature trees will result in the unreplenishable loss of habitat for wildlife and carbon sequestration that helps us to keep our streets cool and soak up damaging stormwater runoff. Adding more pavement and retaining walls to an area already prone to flooding will make the problem worse. Incidentally, the name of this housing development, which requires the cutting down of red maple trees, insults our commitment to environmental stewardship. No less important, this is an environmental and racial justice travesty because the size and scale of this proposed development will shrink East Towson out of existence. Commercialization has been closing in on this community for years. In the words of the Northeast Towson Improvement Association, it will relegate East Towson community to the annals of history. While we support an increase in affordable housing, as the association further states, a federal mandate requiring affordable housing on the scale proposed is more of an excuse than a solution and can in no way be described as good public service. It is the opinion of the GSC that East Towson is due the same respect as given to West Towson. We urge you to stand by your Sierra Club endorsement and your pledge to hold the line on outsized development. Please act on your pledge by withdrawing your support for the Red Maple housing development as it is currently proposed. Thank you for your consideration. That's Carol Headland, co-chair of the Green Sanctuary Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker, Madam Chair, is Corey Warren.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Corey Warren. I'm a staff attorney with Disability Rights Maryland. I'm one of the signatories on the letter sent to Mr. Benjamin earlier on this matter. Disability Rights Maryland is one of the signatories and complainants on the voluntary compliance agreement that the county entered into in March 2016. We are in opposition to this bill. This bill seems to be heading in the wrong direction in getting the county to be compliant with their obligations under the VCA. The VCA is requiring Baltimore County to create 1,000 new affordable rental housing units in opportunity areas over a 12-year period. 570 of those are supposed to be approved by the end of 2020. The county is only reporting 503 units approved, including 50 units at Red Maple, which is, even if Red Maple and this bill is to be killed, the county is still going to be 67 units short of the requirement. If Red Maple is not to go forward, then that's going to be 117 units short of the requirement. The VCA also requires the county to create at least a minimum 100 affordable units that are accessible to persons with wheelchairs, known as UFAS units. Red Maple was going to provide 3 of those units. By killing the project, we're just not sure where those wheelchair accessible units are going to be. And on the human cost of that, I know the Image Center will also be testifying. So what we're looking at is the county just not making its obligations under the VCA. This is also a concern because 9 of the units at Red Maple were also supposed to be affordable housing opportunities for people in the 811 program, which is the program run by the Maryland Department of Disabilities, which is to ensure extremely low-income persons with disabilities have a place to live, where they can be included in their communities and be moved out of institutional settings. Outside of the disability realm, there's also racial disparate impact considerations. Practices including zoning decisions and ordinances that have the effect of excluding Black families from living in neighborhoods like Pikesville and Towson. It's perpetuating longstanding racial segregation in the county, which does bring up considerations under the Fair Housing Act. So because of this, our organization is taking a firm stance. We are in opposition to this bill. This is, by removing affordable housing. Actually, one last point. Red Maple was the last LIHTC unit approved. There are no LIHTC units. Can I keep talking or am I muted?
You may wrap up your comment.
Thank you. Red Maple was the last LIHTC property approved by the DHCD. There have been no other LIHTC applications for development for the last 2 years. This bill is just telling developers not to come to Baltimore County, and we've seen that because of the fact we haven't had another LIHTC application for 2 years. So that's where I will end.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker, Madam Chair, is Elizabeth Miller. Ms. Miller?
Yes,
You may
I'm here.
begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Council. My name is Beth Miller, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Green Towson Alliance. We support Bill 107-20 because it will prevent outsized development in the historic community of East Towson. This council recently passed legislation making East Towson a design review area. This legislation brings property currently zoned for much taller buildings into compliance with the scale and heights called for in the Towson Community Plan for East Towson. GTA supports affordable housing, equitable preservation of environmental resources, and adherence to environmental laws. This legislation applies to environmentally sensitive land that is currently acting as a sponge to absorb stormwater. The bill increases the chances that the development of that land would be in compliance with environmental laws to protect our waterways. Development plans in historic East Towson would remove approximately 1.3 acres of woods from a steeply sloping piece of land directly adjacent to the headwaters of a branch of the Herring Run stream and the only remaining wetland in Towson. The land has never been developed and is earmarked for preservation as open space in the Towson Community Plan. The proposed development is only possible because the county granted an environmental variance and financial support. Due to the steep slopes and soils on this site, a 100-foot forest buffer is required, but the developer obtained a variance that allows them to reduce the wetland buffer to 25 feet. Forest buffers perform essential environmental services, including filtering, slowing, and absorbing stormwater and cooling the water for the creatures that live in the stream. Another environmental problem with intense development that would remove woods in this community is flooding. Pennsylvania Avenue in East Towson has flooded for years during storms. I live downstream from Towson and Annesley, where we are already experiencing the cumulative effects of years of development, combined with more intense and frequent storms. The county recently bought and demolished several houses along the Herring Run near Stevenson Lane, but flooding continues to be such a problem that more homeowners are seeking and getting relief. The county is also funding projects in Stoneleigh and my neighborhood to manage flooding. Worse yet, erosion from flooding undermines another county obligation to improve water quality, an obligation that is well served by enforcing forest buffer laws. It makes little fiscal or environmental sense to allow intense development at the headwaters of the very tributary of the Herring Run that is the source of all this flooding. Allowing taller than typical buildings to be built too close to a wetland and stream in a historically African-American community that has already suffered a history of environmental racism is a badly flawed plan. Please vote in support of Bill 107-20 to protect this community and downstream communities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker, Madam Chair, is Joe Marvin. Probably not saying their names correctly. My apologies.
That is correct. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the council. My name is Joe Marvin. I represent and I'm a board member of the Towson Communities Alliance, which is a non-profit umbrella organization of 30 residential community associations in the greater Towson area, 2 of which are Harris Hill condominiums and East Towson neighborhood, which are adjacent to the property in question. We have been aware of this proposal for a couple of years and have a lot of anxiety about it on behalf of the residents for all the issues mentioned, as the ones Beth talked about from Green Towson Alliance, particularly because of the size of the property that is being proposed for this site. The bill that Mr. Marks is intending to present to you, 107-20, is requesting the height of the building proposed be reduced to 30 feet from the builder's proposal of 45 feet, which I am presuming is measured from the Joppa Road side. the land falls very steeply through this green area, which is part of the cause of the flooding, so that on the back side of this building, the wall, the size of it will not be 30 feet or even 45 feet, but more like 70 feet. This is adjacent to two-story homes on the lower level, on the lower side of this property. So we've mentioned before, other people have spoken about the fact that there's an issue about school crowding for this site. There's also significant traffic issues. And there is no intention of any of our groups or members that there shouldn't be affordable housing here if the size of the property can be made to match the surrounding environment. The Harris Hill condominiums were built 25 or 26 years ago and look very appropriate in conjunction with East Towson. And we'd like to see, if there is a development put on this green space, that it could complement that and not be antagonistic in such a large property. So once again, the Towson Community Alliance is supporting Councilman David Mark's Bill 10720 to reduce the proposed height of this proposed structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker, Madam Chair, is David Riley. Mr. Riley?
Yes, ma'am.
You may begin.
Okay. My name is David Riley. I live at 7609 Knollwood Road. I am the president of the Knollwood Association, a community of 380 homes located directly south of historic East Towson. I was also the technical director of the Office of Diversity and Disability for the National Security Agency. I'm here to support Bill 10720. The opponents of the bill would have you believe two things. First, the working class African-American community of historic East Towson is intolerant and uncaring, part of the not in my backyard crowd. And secondly, a corporation is being unfairly singled out in accepting a two-story height restriction on multifamily dwellings. Nothing could be further from the truth. Since the 1970s, 459 rental units have been constructed in East Towson. There are also several specialized housing projects, a BG&E power station, a high-traffic bypass, and a courthouse annex forced into this historic community. In reality, historic East Towson were the victims of not in my backyard discussions and decisions. The bill forces the corporation to adhere to building norms for multifamily dwellings in the surrounding and more affluent communities. The Rogers Forge apartments are located 3 miles southeast. They are made up of two-story red brick structures that blend in with that neighborhood. In 2009, the entire Rogers Forge community was listed in the National Register of Historic Places. So there are two historic communities in Towson. One, Rogers Forge, and the second one is historic East Towson. I challenge everyone to talk about how the historical legitimacy of each of these neighborhoods have been respected over the years. The Donnybrook apartments are located 0.7 miles south. Again, these are two-story brick structures that blend with the East Towson communities of Knollwood and Towson Manor Village. In Donnybrook, there are 260 units on 18 acres. In Red Maples, there are planned 56 units on 3 acres. Red Maples is 30% higher in density than the nearest residential area multifamily dwelling in East Towson. The Cedar Road apartments are located in the affluent community of Wiltondale, located 1.3 miles southwest. Again, it is a two-story brick structure. There are only 8 units in this multifamily dwelling located in one of Towson's most affluent communities. The opposition to this bill will try to confuse the issue by referencing high-density and multi-story buildings located in commercial areas. But the fact is that Red Maples, if completed under the current design, will be by far the most densely populated and the only 4-story multifamily dwelling complex in the surrounding area. I hope that you will save the cultural integrity of historic East Towson by voting for this common sense law. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker, Madam Chair, is Marlene Riley. You could, Ms. Riley. Are you on with?
I registered for Reverend Penn. I registered for Reverend Penn because he was having technical issues, and he will now speak.
Name is Avery Penn, senior pastor of the Mount Olive Church. And I speak for the community of East Towson. And the community itself has a lot of concerns with the project. Not just the height, but what the project will do for the neighborhood and what it will do to the neighborhood. We have no green space in East Towson as it is, and you're taking all the green space away. It's not that we're talking about is the red maple being built, but red maples being taken away. And also there's a concern because a former member of the Mount Olive Church used to live right beside where the project is being built. And her concern and her reason for moving was because of flooding. And if it was then, and I learned some 30-some years ago that she moved to the city because after her husband passed, she was always being flooded out. And now we want to come and take the swamp or this wetland, and we want to build it up as though we're in Florida, where we can gather the water one place and the sand another place and build a building. But the East Towson neighborhood is supposed to be historic. And there are certain guidelines and there are certain height measures. And if we are to do our houses, we have to do our houses according to the guidelines. And to build a project that we disregard or we get waivers on all of the guidelines don't seem fair to the residents of the East Towson community. So we ask that you would take this and reduce it, the size, even though it might not be cost effective, or you would take it and put it someplace else. East Towson has had enough moving in and moving in and moving in, and all of the residents that were originally there, all they find they're doing is being moved out. I thank you for the time.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker, Madam Chair, who I believe is on the same mobile device, is Nancy Goldring. Ms. Goldring, are you there?
Here. Let them know that on. Yeah. How do we let them know that on?
Chat.
Is Ms.
Okay,
Goldring there?
Can they hear me?
Yes, Ms. Goldring, we can hear you.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can. I'm waiting for Ms. Goldring.
Okay.
Sitting here with Reverend.
Nancy Goldring is also on this connection because she was having trouble with the Chrome.
That's fine.
Okay, so she'll now speak.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy Goldring.
Okay. Good evening to the council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I can't hear her.
They can hear you.
Okay. My name is Nancy Goldring. I was born and raised in East Towson, and I have watched, to my chagrin and dismay, as this community has been chipped away at time and time and time again, almost entirely by development. As far as I'm concerned, Historic East Towson has become a living sacrifice for development in Historic East Towson. I'm sorry, for development in Towson, period. And it is my feeling, let me just say to Mr. Fugit's comment that he is incorrect in saying that my problem with the building was the color. My problem with the building was always that it in no way reflected a residence. It in no way was compatible with the existing architecture of the community. I went to a ceremony to honor and to mourn a 130-year-old tree on Friday. The county executive was present. Our sustainability manager was present. Our sustainability manager said trees are life. And I'm saying, are trees life in West Towson, and yet in East Towson, you are planning to cut down an entire forest? Are you saying that if trees are life, that somehow you do not support life in historic East Towson? Let me also clarify to Mr. Fugit's point that when I did speak to him, when I did reach out to the NAACP for assistance with the press, he asked me what I thought was happening with the project. I told him I felt that it was it was designed to systematically wipe historic East Towson off of Towson's map. His immediate response was, "You are absolutely right." And so I thank him for refreshing my memory on that conversation. Know that an ethnographic study has recently been completed by the National Historic Society, confirming that historic East Towson are direct descendants of manumitted slaves from Hampton. I support Bill 10720, and I ask you to do the same.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker, Madam Chair, is Dana Johnson. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you may begin.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this bill. I'm the president of Homes for America, and we are the nonprofit developer of Red Maple Place, which this bill is directed at. This bill is very concerning for us because it would effectively kill the project after 2+ years of work and a significant investment in pre-development expenses. As we have explained to Councilman Marks, we cannot reduce the number of units in the building, so a reduction in the permitted height of the building would prevent the project from moving forward. Homes for America has applied for and been awarded significant subsidies for the building through the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program from the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. These subsidies enable the building to serve residents of low and moderate incomes. These resources were applied for and awarded through a very competitive process in which the Maryland DHCD scores the application based on a wide range of criteria, including unit count and sizes. Maryland DHCD does not permit changes to these criteria after an award of subsidies is made. Homes for America is a mission-driven, experienced development company with a strong track record. Red Maple will be an asset to the Towson community and the county as a whole. The building will be an attractive, well-managed apartment community, including 56 units with both affordable and market rate rents. I want to point out the building is already significantly smaller than what is permitted under the current zoning and will utilize only about half the area of the site. Over the last 2 years, we have received support both from this council and Councilman Marks several times. This council supported a law change that enabled us to move and reorient the building on the site so it would be farther from the neighboring townhomes and would reduce environmental impacts. This was done in response to community concerns and at significant additional cost. This council also denied a request earlier this year to downzone the property. This support has been critical to the development of the property. Now, we have a fully designed and priced building with all of its financing ready to move towards closing. We have an administrative law judge hearing scheduled for November 19th after months of waiting for these hearings to restart. And after all this time, within a month of our long-awaited hearing date, this council has passed one resolution to require the development to be reviewed by the design review panel, which is a new hurdle that costs us time and money, and is now debating the passage of this bill, which would kill the project without approval of a variance to enable the building to be taller. Even if you're not a fan of affordable housing, I hope that the sheer unfairness of the timing of this bill would give you pause as you debate it. Further, I believe that passage of this bill would be a potential violation of the Fair Housing Act, and we would explore legal action if it is passed. I encourage you to vote against this bill and allow the development to proceed to the administrative law judge hearing next week. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker, Madam Chair, is Hinley Williams.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening. Thank you all for the opportunity to share a little bit of information about how this bill would affect people with disabilities. I want to share a little bit about why affordable housing is important for people with disabilities. I'm an independent living specialist at the Image Center, which is located in Towson. We serve Baltimore County, Baltimore City, and Harford County. We have a lot of services at our center for people with disabilities. One of those services includes information and resources for people with disabilities and giving them information about the different systems that are available in the county to individuals. One of the most common questions that we get is people reaching out to us asking about affordable housing as well as accessible housing, for which this development would provide several units. We probably get about at least 2 affordable housing calls per day, and about 75% of the calls we get are people wanting to live in the Baltimore County area to take advantage of its wonderful opportunities and to be contributing members of the community. These individuals are approaching us to find assistance and help, but it's not always help that's very easy to get. Everything that we can tell these individuals that would result in them getting an affordable or accessible apartment is waiting lists, which are very, very lengthy. Earlier, the 811 program was mentioned, and this development would provide a number of 811 units. 811 is a housing waiting list specifically for people with disabilities run through the Maryland Department of Disabilities. And we at the Image Center can place people on that waiting list and assist them with their transition into living into their new homes. One of the things that we understand is that this is a difficult spot in terms of opportunities, and that there aren't many in the area that are proposed, that this is proposed to be built. But let me share a little bit with you about what these people are coming from and how grateful they would be to just have a roof over their heads. These individuals are often homeless, living in their cars, sometimes checking into the hospital just to have a place to stay. Sometimes they're homeless, living on someone's front porch, someone from their church, someone who's a family member. Others of these individuals are people with disabilities who ended up in nursing homes. And during their time in the nursing home, they were able to work often with our staff, but there are other organizations that do this as well, on figuring out options where they can live independently in the community. So these individuals have the supports and the different things that they would need in order to live in the community. They have everything all set to go, except a place that they can afford. And so they're stuck in nursing homes and in these congregate facilities where during this COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen just how dangerous that can be. And I will tell you that this pandemic has wiped out thousands of people with disabilities. So I understand the objections in the community. These people who live in nursing homes are not people that we often hear from because they're separate from us. And they deserve an integrated place to live, a clean place to live, where they can practice social distancing during a pandemic if that's what they choose, or even outside of the pandemic, they have a place where they can receive home and community-based services and be fully integrated in our society. I also want to note that a number of the 811 applicants are veterans. And that's very timely during this week when we're celebrating Veterans Day. And we want to make sure that those people have a place to live that they can afford. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Madam Chair, our next speaker is Phoebe Latoka. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Ms. Latoka?
Yes, hi. Good morning, council members. My name is Phoebe Evans Latosha, and I'm testifying in favor of Bill 107, which would reduce the height and therefore the capacity of the proposed Red Maple Place multi-unit housing development. Capacity is the key word, as reducing capacity is necessary given the extreme overcrowding in the Towson High School District, where students from this development would be zoned to attend. I recognize that Baltimore County needs to provide more affordable housing, and specifically in the greater Towson area. I support affordable housing and would much rather see affordable and mixed income housing approved in the Towson area instead of luxury housing that we've been getting in this area, like nearby Towson Mews. Find ways to convert existing housing units to more mixed income and affordable housing. We need greater diversity of income in Towson. However, we have a school capacity crisis right now at all levels of schools in the Towson area, most acutely felt at Towson High. I'm the parent of both a recent Towson graduate and current Towson High student and advocate for solutions to school overcrowding. Towson High is projected this school year to be 429 students over capacity, which is 134% of its state-rated capacity of 1260. It has been overcrowded for years and is projected to continue to be overcrowded for at least the next 10 years with no funded solution. While our students are currently engaged in remote learning, having a school that is over capacity makes it harder for them to return to in-person instruction during our current pandemic. Towson High has had its current batch of trailers on site since 2004, which means some of its 12 trailers are going on their 17th year of service. Why would the county approve a new housing development in a chronically overcrowded school district? Not only would Red Maple Place add to the overcrowding at Towson High, it is also located in the school zones for Dumbarton Middle and Hampton Elementary. Dumbarton just had a renovation in 2018, which opened overcrowded, so it needs 2 trailers to address the 122 students over its 1114 state-rated capacity. With the redistricting that was approved in March 2020 to address overcrowding at Pleasant Plains Elementary, enrollment at its neighboring Hampton Elementary has now grown by 100 students. Hampton is again overcrowded just after just completing an addition project in 2013 to address its previous round of overcrowding. The school impact analysis submitted in April 2020 for Red Maple Place failed to account for the changes to the Hampton Elementary School District that went into effect this year that brought it over capacity. We cannot keep approving housing units in overcrowded school districts. With its adequate public facilities ordinance task force, this council has acknowledged that its process for providing adequate public facilities for its schools is broken. Most of the neighboring elementary, middle, high schools are overcrowded, and few schools that are not yet overcrowded don't have enough seats in the area. There's literally nowhere to find relief for existing capacity. So I urge you to please support this legislation to reduce the capacity and reduce the impact of overcrowding on our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Madam Chair, our last speaker this evening is Deborah Kleinman.
Okay.
Hello, Ms. Kleinman? Yes, can you hear me? Yes, we can. All right, thank you. Dear Madam Chair and County Council members, thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of Bill 10720 on behalf of the people and the forest of Northeast Towson. My name is Deborah Kleinman, aka Spice, and I am the chair of the Greater Baltimore Group of the Sierra Club, a progressive environmental organizations. I want to start off by emphasizing that we support affordable housing wholeheartedly in Baltimore County and beyond, and know there is a shortage. However, the placement of the Red Maple Place project is absolutely in the wrong location. For one, this location appears to be putting an historically Black community in opposition to other organizations that would normally support them, i.e. the NAACP and the ACLU. In my opinion, the developer has not considered the needs of this historical and cultural treasure, and I personally don't understand how Baltimore County could give the go-ahead for this development in the first place. Number 2, Sierra Club's opinion is that by taking down this patch of forest and the last green space in East Towson, make flooding a much greater issue than it already is, and many of the communities south of it. I've lived in Idlewild for 20 years, and our flooding has gotten worse and worse due to much of the construction in the Herring Run watershed north of my neighborhood, as well as the climate crisis. They are clearly disregarding that there is going to be a water issue.
It is vital to maintain the physical integrity of this established community of African American residents, and taking down green space while building a huge building for anyone on a steep slope will have the opposite effect. This neighborhood already has a BG&E substation, the Towson Town Boulevard bypass, and concrete high-rises with parking lots being built as I speak. The neighborhood is being encroached upon with more and more development, as it has been since freed slaves from the Hampton Mansion founded it over 150 years ago. Wouldn't it be amazing if this neighborhood was on a tour for students to talk about the history of slavery in Baltimore County and beyond? We believe affordable housing is vital. We know the abandoned buildings that is next to the forest is on sale for $1.8 million. Why not use that? We know the county has said they would give the developers $2.3 million with no interest for 40 years to build the Red Maple building, which does not comply with building codes, and were granted an environmental variance pertaining to the wetland buffer. This is environmental racism, I believe, at its core, and not at all green. This is not NIMBYism, which some folks are claiming, not in my backyard. This is the protection of the last green space in East Towson, as well as respect for a community that has been exploited by Baltimore County for many years. The GBG, the Greater Baltimore Group of the Sierra Club, supports David Marks's bill 107-20 and wants the affordable housing developers to build in another area. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And this concludes the speaker on this bill. And I believe this concludes our work session for this evening. I was going to say this afternoon, but it's this evening now. Okay, so we'll close, and thank you, everyone, and stay safe. And we can communicate through the week and up to the council meeting if necessary. Okay, everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.